Hi everyone, welcome to our now it's 17th Python tutorial. And in the previous tutorial, we covered variables and variable scopes, and that's all within functions. And we're going to build upon that idea of function variables and get more specific with function arguments in today's tutorial. So what exactly do we do with functions and what are they, right? So when wanting to pass information into a function, we utilize these arguments or parameters as they're also known. And we specify these arguments within the parentheses at the end of a function definition. And as you guys know already, arguments must be separated with commas if we want to have multiple arguments. And you're allowed to have an infinite number of arguments with a function definition. So today we're going to discuss the three main types of arguments that we use when defining functions, and that's default, keyword, and arbitrary arguments. And I'll give examples for all three of those and how exactly we use them in programming day in and day out. So let's just go ahead and get started, and we're going to begin with default arguments. And default arguments within a function are simply as a backup plan or failsafe, and they signal to the compiler that in case a value is not supplied by the programmer, a value will still be assigned automatically. So I'll go ahead and write a quick program that will show you how exactly we utilize default arguments in our Python code. So let's begin. Right, so I've completed two quick examples of default arguments and how they're used within our function definitions. So as you can see, we are doing our regular function definition, and instead of just passing a regular argument or saying that our function will take in a regular argument, what we're doing is we're setting our variable or argument to a given value. So here we have name and overall, which I've set to 75, kind of an average number. And within, I'm simply returning both of that information. So when I run this code, you can see there won't be any issues. And LeBron James, it will simply say LeBron James has about a 99 overall rating for this first statement. But whereas the second statement, you can see that we're not passing this value for overall. And when we do that, we don't want our function to return any issues. So instead, it will just give them an average 75 overall rating. So once again, you can view it as a simple backup plan or failsafe. And there's one little thing that comes into play when working with these default arguments, and it's that after a default argument has been defined, no other default arguments can therefore follow that. So you can see right here, I have the save method. I've just called it NBA player 2, and we have our name and overall, which I've set to 75 because that's a default argument right here. And right after, I've created a new argument and I'm calling it jersey, right, for jersey number. So once again, I'm just returning the statement. And this time when I call NBA player number 2 and I'm supplying LeBron 99 and 23. So even though I'm giving it all its information, it still is going to find an issue because non-default argument follows a default argument. So it's important to remember that that is not allowed when working with default arguments. So now that we got a quick understanding of what exactly default arguments are and how to work with them and what to do exactly when we see them in a program, now let's get into keyword arguments. And keyword arguments, with the use of keyword arguments, we are allowed to modify and change the order with which we call functions. And you'll see how that comes into play right now as I make this quick little program. So let me get right into it. Okay, so now I've completed a quick program or a quick couple of programs on keyword arguments and how we use them. So once again, keyword arguments, we use them to modify and change the order with which we call functions. So right here, you can see when I'm calling my function, character function, and I'm asking that it supply f name, first name, last name, and our age, which I've made a default argument as we've seen above. So once again, it's just a quick program returning all that. And in this line here, you can see I'm calling all of our values out of order. And the reason I'm doing that is this is where we're using our keyword arguments and where they come into play. So once again, L name is equal to Parker, age is equal to 16, and first name is equal to Peter. And you can see I'm calling them all out of order. So that's what keyword arguments generally allows us to do. And along with keyword arguments, we see a lot of positional arguments, and positional arguments are what we're usually used to. So as you can see back in our original program, when we're saying NBA player and we're calling LeBron James with a 99 overall, this is simply using positional arguments as we're lining up the positions of the values that we are basically supplying to our method. So here you can see we're mixing keyword and positional arguments, and with that we're saying Peter, and we're supplying this positionally, and then the last two we're supplying using our keyword argument abilities. And there's one important piece of that you need to make sure you don't mess up with, and that's once you supply a keyword argument, you can't supply any positional arguments after it. So let me go ahead and run all three, and you can see exactly what's occurring. So with this first one, it's just working fine. And then this next one also, we're using our mixed keyword and positional. But with this last one, you can see that it's causing an issue because we're using a positional argument and it follows a keyword argument. So it's important to make sure that you don't make this mistake. And once again, it's probably really easy to remember because you can't do the same thing up here where you're passing a non-default argument after a after a default argument. So that makes it pretty easy to understand. And now that we got a quick grasp on the default arguments and the keyword arguments, and with a little bit of positional argument understanding, it's time that we get into arbitrary arguments. And this is probably the most interesting out of all of them. And once we do that, we'll be completed with this quick tutorial on arguments. So let me go ahead and get into arbitrary arguments. And we utilize arbitrary arguments when we cannot anticipate in advance how many arguments will be passed. So this is just basically a super large failsafe where we're okay with passing any number of values to our method. So let me go ahead and write this program. Right, so here you can see I've made a super duper simple program that will show us how we use arbitrary arguments. And the key difference that you notice from this method or this function from all the other functions is that this little star character that we're using right here, and that basically notifies our compiler that this is going to be a function with arbitrary arguments. And you can see right below that we're supplying basically multiple numbers of arguments, and all of these arguments will then be stored as a tuple within our method. So that was just a quick rundown on the different types of arguments that you may see when working with Python. And it's important to know how to use all of these because it's going to come really in handy when we start working with more complex and deeper programs that require these default arguments or require us to use keyword arguments or arbitrary arguments. So once again, I hope this gave you a quick understanding of all the function arguments within Python. And as always, I will be linking my program and my original program into the description of the video below so that you can access it later on. And I hope you had a really great time and learned something. I'll see you in the next tutorial.